Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about Zorach versus Clauson that took place in 1952. And this is my friend Kevin.
Hi guys, I'm Gavin D'Amico. I'm going to be walking us through the parties involved with the case, the basic facts, and the legal issues.
And I'm going to be talking about the Supreme Court's decision in this case. And I'm going to also talk about our opinion on the case and conclude everything at the end.
So, first off, the parties involved with the case. The defendant party is the New York City Board of Education. This is the government body responsible for overseeing public education in New York City. The board implemented a program called Release Time, which allowed public school students to be excused from regular classes during certain hours to attend religious instruction off campus. This idea was given to students who wanted to participate in religious activities to have the chance to do so without interfering with their public education. However, the board required students to keep record of which students participated to ensure the parental permissions were released. Next, the plaintiffs was the parents and taxpayers represented by Zorach. This group included concerned parents and community members who felt that the release time program violated Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. They believed that by allowing students to leave school for religious instruction, even if it was off campus and voluntary, the school is becoming involved in religious activities by a public institution and entangled the government with religious matters. Their primary concern was that the public schools, as government entities, should remain strictly not neutral in religious matters and avoid any involvement in promoting religious practices, even if it is indirect. Next, we're going to be talking about some basic facts of the case. In New York City during the 1950s, the public school system implemented a program known as Release Time. This program allowed students to leave school for the part of the day to attend to religious instruction classes, which were held off campus. This program was designed to help families who wanted their children to receive religious education without missing a regular school schedule. Participation in the program was completely voluntary, and the parents who wanted their children to participate had to provide a written permission. Students who did not wish to participate remained at school and continued with their regular classes. The school did not provide the religious instruction themselves, nor did they fund or directly organize the off campus classes. However, the schools did play a role in scheduling the release times and keeping track on which students went to the program. This involvement included keeping records of students who attended the religious program, excusing them from regular school hours, and they had to assure that they returned at the appropriate time. This role was limited to tracking attendance and managing release times, but it still created an indirect connection between the public schools and religious instruction. This concerned parents because they argued that the allowing public schools to organize release time for religious classes and track attendance blurred the lines between church and state. They feel that this limited involvement by the schools was a form of indirect support for religion, which they believed went against the Establishment Clause for the First Amendment. This Establishment Clause requires that the government institutions, like public schools, remain neutral on religious matters and avoid endorsing or promoting religion. This disagreement led to a legal challenge that reached the Supreme Court. The court had to decide whether the release time program was deemed unconstitutional and was simply an acceptable way to accommodate religious freedom for students. The outcome of the case would address how far public institutions could go in accommodating for religious activities without crossing the line into endorsing religion. Lastly, I'm going to be talking about legal issues. The central legal question in the case was whether the public school's involvement in the release time program violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. The Establishment Clause, which states that Congress shall not make no law respecting an establishment of religion, is interpreted to mean that the government entities, including public schools, cannot endorse, support, or become involved with religious activities. In this case, the New York City Board of Education allows students with parental permission to attend religious classes off campus during school hours. Although participation was voluntary and no religious instruction took place on school grounds, the public school system was still involved in tracking attendance and organizing the release of students. This involvement led to concerns that the school was indirectly supporting or endorsing religion by facilitating students access to religious instruction, potentially blurring the line between church and state. The plaintiffs argued that the program was deemed unconstitutional because the school's involvement could be seen as encouraging the students to participate in religious activities. They believed that even indirect support, such as releasing students for religious purposes and keeping record of participants, constituted a breach of the clause.
Next up, I'm going to be talking about the Supreme Court's decision. And the Supreme Court, first of all, let's talk about what the Supreme Court had to decide. If New York City's release time program for religious classes really violated the First Amendment. So again, the program allowed public school students to leave school for part of the day to attend religious classes somewhere off campus, off school property, if their parents gave permission. It was totally optional for students to go to these classes if they wanted to, or stay in school if they didn't. And the court decided that this program did not violate the Constitution. The court ruled 6-3 in favor of the program's constitutionality. They said it was okay because it didn't force students to participate in this program and didn't actually mix religious teachings with the public school system. And the court gave a few main reasons why this setup was constitutional. And the first that we already mentioned, that it was completely voluntary choice for the students. If the student really wanted to participate, they could go to the religious instruction if their parents gave a permit for them to go to these regular type activities. But if a students didn't want to go or they were not pushed at all, they could stay in class and everything continued without change. The second, like mentioned, was that the religious classes were held off campus. And this is also another reason the court was okay with the program, was because the religious instruction didn't take place at the school itself. The classes happened at churches or other off-campus, like school locations. And since the public schools buildings or resources were in use for these religious classes, the school wasn't directly involved in religious teachings. This separation made it clear that the school wasn't endorsing or promoting religion. The school only had a limited role. The school's only role was tracking which students were attending the religious classes and excusing them at specific times. This was just for organizational purposes, like knowing where students were during the day. Since the school was only doing the basic administrative work and wasn't involved in the religious part itself, the court didn't see it as a violation of church-state separation. This was their third point. The fourth point was that the court also talked about how the government doesn't have to be hostile toward religion or completely ignore it. Justice Douglas, who wrote the opinion for the majority, said that the government can make room for people's religious practices as long as it doesn't push anyone to participate or promote any specific religion. In this case, allowing students to leave religious instructions respected their freedom of religion without the school directly getting involved. The Supreme Court's decision said that the Constitution lets public schools respect students' religious choices as long as it's voluntary and there is a clear separation between religious activities and the school's role. The program wasn't forcing or encouraging anyone to a religion, so the court ruled it was okay. So next, you can also talk between each other, or if you have a friend, if you're watching a video with someone, if you agree or disagree with this decision. We think that the Supreme Court's decision in this case, the Zorach versus Clauson, makes sense because it respects both students' religious freedom and the need to keep religion separate from public schools. By allowing students to leave school for religious instructions off campus, the court gave families the option to pursue religious education if they wanted without involving the school in the actual religious teachings. And one thing that stands out to me is that the program was completely voluntary. So no one was forced to participate, none of the students. And the students who didn't want to join in this program could stay at the school and keep up with their usual classes. And since the religious instruction happened off school property and wasn't paid for it with public funds, it kept a clear line. We think they kept a clear line between the school's role and the religious activities. We also agree that the court's point that respecting religious practices doesn't mean the school is promoting them. The Constitution shouldn't make public schools hostile to religious choices. It just needs to make sure they don't actively promote or fund them. In this case, the school found a way to give students the choice if they wanted to step into religious endorsement or not. And the school did this without stepping into this endorsement of religion. And that said, we also do understand why some people, parents, worry that any school involvement with religious activities could seem like a gray area. Even just tracking attendance might feel like the school is connected to the program, especially to people who are very cautious about church-state separation. But we think that the court made a good decision here by allowing the program with the right boundaries. The decision allows students and families to make personal choices about religion without involving public or the public school system too deeply, which feels like a fair, balanced outcome. So all in all, the Zorach versus Clauson case set a really important example of how public schools can respect students' religious practices without violating the Constitution or the First Amendment. The Supreme Court decided that it was okay for New York City schools to let students leave school during the day and attend these religious classes off campus as long as it was totally voluntary and took place outside of the school. The school only handled the basics, like what we talked about, tracking who went. The court found that this setup respected students' freedom of religion without making the school endorse or support religion, as long as they keep a clear boundary and get too involved in religious activities.